Canal anglais, canal 2, canal anglais, canal 2. Est-ce que tu me reçois? Ok.
Q? No, it's not. Okay. It's this man here. Dan.
Okay.
Dan. D-A-N. Saba. S-A-B-B-A-H. Who do you work for? I'm so sorry.
The Guardian?
The Guardian. Thank you. I will.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Possible que monsieur doit partir.
Yeah, we will be outside.
Ça s'appelle date 5. Don't worry, don't worry. C'est bon pour moi, j'ai le micro.
Ouais, je crois. Allez-y, Olivia.
Messieurs les ministres,
Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, will be in a position to start this press conference, which will last for 45 minutes. We will start with a declaration from each ministers, and then we will have questions. Each country represented will be able to ask one question. Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm delighted to welcome you, ministers, another time in Paris. And it is very good that we are all gathered here in order to have a debrief on our discussions among the 5 greatest military powers in the European continent, in the beautiful location of the Val de Grâce here in Paris. And I would like to thank the Commissioner in charge of Defense, Andrius, who is here with us today. This is a very unique moment when it is very important to resynchronize our action between Washington and Kiev. As you know, in Saudi Arabia, there were discussions yesterday, and our efforts have had some positive effects. The ball is now in the court of Russia, and this is when the real negotiation starts, so that we can have a ceasefire, a real one, and have detailed discussions on the real parameters of a durable peace. This afternoon, we have focused on a number of chapters, two in particular. First of all, the guarantees of security that we can give Ukraine. We are all very determined to learn from the past and avoid some mistakes. We do not want a new Yalta, where we shared our zones of influence in Europe between great powers, neither Budapest, where we asked to renounce imperialism. We do not want to have a repeat of Minsk I or Minsk II, with ceasefires that have been negotiated without guarantees of a sustainable peace. And after 2 or 3 years, we have to ask ourselves the right questions, because, of course, behind Ukraine, it is the whole of the European continent that is at stake. And that is what we have discussed this afternoon with a video link, a secure video link with Ukraine. We have discussed with John Healey, Minister of His Majesty's government, and Tony Radakin with General Burka for the French. We had a number of discussions also with other countries of the E5, with an invitation to a coalition of the willing. And the first security guarantee for Ukraine is, of course, the Ukrainian armed forces, the equipment, armament, the training, the shape. And we have seen that in the information war that is led by Russia. There is a word that comes back coming from Russia, which is demilitarization of Ukraine. Of course, this is something we don't want. We want to give Ukraine the means to be strong, and the aid to Ukraine is extremely crucial. And as we are trying to ramp up our defense spending, we need to ask ourselves the question of frozen Russian assets. We also want to discuss what shape this will have in the future based on several pillars. We want to learn from the past. Our Chief of Defense Staff have presented some hypotheses in order to be able to present them to the political leaders in order to think really what this security architecture could look like, and how it could be conducive to a sustainable peace. Of course, our British friend will come back on that, but I think that about 15 countries are interested to participate in this thought process. Sometimes it is too easy to simplify it to the presence of troops on Ukrainian soil, but there are other subjects that are even more crucial: security in the Black Sea, and safety of nuclear plants in Ukraine. And these are also topics that need a very deep military reflection. And I know that our British and French generals have been discussing that, and also try to work out how we can share the load of this thinking. And this will be useful to shape the guarantees in the medium and long run in Ukraine. Dear John, in the next 2 weeks, I think we will have an opportunity to meet with the complete set of defense ministers. We'll have a discussion at political level. Why 2 weeks? Well, because if Russia accepts the ceasefire, which is not yet guaranteed, we have to think in terms of 30 days, and perhaps we can take stock in halfway point and 15 days. Then we discussed also our own rearmament. What is not new is the Russian threat, but what is new is the fact that it has become difficult to predict. So the unpredictability is a new aspect, and the umbrella is not a new element. The US had already asked the European countries to take charge of their own security on the European continent. There's been a lot of talk of money in the media. So this afternoon, we wanted not only to talk about money, but also to talk about what were the urgent points to solve. For France, a few urgent points have to be dealt with neighboring countries with this format here. So first aspect is the ground-to-air defense. And so that's a high specter to anti-drone fight. It's also true with state threat and terrorism. So we need to think the whole architecture, ground-to-air, and this is very important. It's a complex issue, but we need to step up because the rhythm of our response and our reaction is too slow. So we've worked out a few initiatives to move forward more quickly. And then there is the space aspect, aerospace. The fact that we don't want to see Europe lagging behind on this. And we have a European project on this. And we have today, we are dependent on Starlink. We need to make sure that we have something to produce. We need to move forward more quickly on aerospace, not to be left behind. And that is when we see that treaties are important in the European Union. We also have a forward warning so that we can share information when we see a missile being launched from Russia, so that we're all aware of it at the same time. And France is making proposals to work with our German friends, because this threat in the next 5, 10, or 15 years is something we must move forward on. In order to conclude and to summarize our discussion, our roadmap must take into account industrial aspects. Guido, Italian counterpart, and our Polish counterpart also emphasized our new initiatives, something that we want to see discussed again. The subcontractors sometimes are overwhelmed, and there are some bottlenecks in the production of armament. So we need to find solution to alleviate the weight of our supply chain on a number of subcontractors and have more resilience in the production and the supply chain. We saw recently that a number of industrial know-how left Europe, so we have to make sure that we have this know-how in Europe, and if we can't do it each on our own, then we need to pool our efforts to work together and have it all the same in Europe. We discussed the MBDA and Airbus, production of missiles, and the rare earth and interoperability between equipments in Europe. Sometimes our armed forces are not as coordinated as we would like, but this is inherited from the 1970s and 1980s. Our weapon system are much more complex these days. And we realize that we have to make choices. And there are, of course, simplifications to be had. And the commissioner here knows what I mean, that we will want to see simplified methods. Of course, there is much more uncertainty in our transatlantic relationship, and I think that the European Union has a role to play on that, and we need to have implementation of our defense industry as we see it. I will not dwell on that. I will give the floor to my colleagues. We've had 3 meetings so far. I think the next one will happen in Italy, and then the next one after that in the UK. I think that this format is something that is going to give good results. It is the way forward, and we are in a position to coordinate ourselves, and not only amongst ourselves, but with the European Union. And we want to be in charge of very specific tasks in order to step up our defense spending and our defense, and we'll be able to meet again very soon. Germany.
Cher Sébastien, chers collègues, mesdames et messieurs.
Dear Sebastian, dear colleagues, we are very pleased, very happy to be here in Paris. And I will switch to German. I'm very pleased to be in Paris. I always find about the hidden gems of Paris, the Val de Grâce venue, which is absolutely breathtaking. So, Sebastian, thank you very much for inviting us here. Thank you for preparing and organizing our meeting so well. This is our 3rd meeting. Thank you, John. Thank you, Guido. Thank you, Vladislav. We've had a very free conversation. This is one of the specificity of our meetings. We have free remarks flowing. We do not pre-write our comments, which is quite one of a kind. We have an important mission in this small format because we want to develop initiatives who could apply to other European partners within the EU, but also with its partners, such as the UK and outside the EU. We have a high level of harmonization with NATO and the EU. We've talked about Ukraine the day after Jeddah negotiations, so it was very timely, even though we didn't do it on purpose, when we decided on the dates. The Deputy Minister for Defense from Ukraine took part in a video call to our first session. And we know there is a proposal that is on the table. It was drafted by Ukraine and the US. It's a good first step. It would be a 30-day ceasefire. We welcome this document. Having a 1-month truce can be very useful, but only if we make the best possible use of this period. Our chiefs of defense will be working on some plans in the framework of the ceasefire, and now it is up to Vladimir Putin to be available, as he's always claimed he would be, for a ceasefire. It is up to him to stop bombing and to stop sending missiles, drones, bombs. Russia must also stop its attacks on the Black Sea and all along the front line. We also welcome the fact that the United States decided to resume the military aid to Ukraine and decided to upturn the suspension of the delivery. We pleased to hear that intelligence sharing also resumed. All the necessary support that might not come from the US anymore in the future, we are trying to make up for it and to replace it, if possible. When it comes to ammunition and training, we are trying to act as fast as possible to bridge the gaps, and we are also looking into bridging the gap if there were to be a loss of a satellite communication. My counterpart, John Healey, and myself decided a few days ago to keep the work of the UDCG going under our joint chairing. And we will probably invite to a meeting in April in Brussels to prove that Ukraine can actually count on us. We've also discussed the ability of Europe and the European defense industry. Andreas Kubilius, as well as Charles Fries and Ludmila took part into our meeting. It was very useful. Earlier this year, we made some proposals around how we could keep progressing, and the heads of states and governments made way for these proposals in the ReArm Europe program around procurement. It is a list of settings to get rid of as much red tape as possible. There is a lot of leeway to speed up procurement processes. We want to buy more materials, more homogeneous material, and we would also like to deregulate. It will be the final achievement of this process at the national level, but also in the EU. In Europe, we still have major armament systems that are still too different from one another. We need interoperability with military, financial, and economic advantages. Joint procurements are a way to save costs. We could train our staff on jointly for maintenance and for repair. It could be available for others. We could make our maintenance facilities available for others. It would be more flexible, there would be less bureaucracy involved, and our goal is to better explain our capability needs. We need more harmonization at that level, and then the Europeans need to define their capability needs once and for all, and for everyone who wants to join the common procurement processes, they would be welcome, and it would make the whole task really easier. Now we need a framework, and this is my second point, not only for procurement but also for our equipment. We have contracts with our industry, contracts that are open to others. An example, ELSA. Several nations are gathering to develop armament systems, precision and long-range systems, among others. Other nations should be able to join these procurement programs easily, quickly, and the representatives of the industry should get more guarantees thanks to the volume involved. They have more visibility, and they would be able to ramp up the volume of their production. We cannot accept that a certified armament system for my friend Sebastian should go through another certification process in Germany. This is a waste of time. It is actually very costly too. So these certification processes should be unified and should be standardized all throughout Europe. More investment is needed. You know, I'm sure that we are currently negotiating to get a new government. We have the next steps in view, and now we would like to amend the constitution to deregulate procurement processes. But we are also going to have a text around the calculation of debt. And if the parliament approves the text, we will exclude the major armament programs, armament projects from the level of debt calculation. The amount will not be taken into account when working out the level of debt. We will be freer for it. We'll have more flexibility and have a closer relationship with the defense industry. We also plan to speed up procurement, production, but also opening our infrastructure, which is why we are going to have a joint market with our partners. I will speak English for my main message. If now we choose European security further than national interests, we will be stronger for it. And now the Italian Minister for Defense. Thank you, Sebastian, for for your hospitality. Thank you, dear colleagues. I think these meetings make a difference because we keep moving forward. We uphold the trust we have for one another. It's a good way to get our leaders and our industries closer. We are at a key moment in time because when we decided to meet in Paris today, none of us could have guessed we would get good news yesterday, namely the agreement that was found in Jeddah between the Ukrainian and the American delegations that were sent by Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Trump. So that was quite unexpected, but now it is up to Putin to decide. Sebastian, John, and the chiefs of defense have presented us with the process they've initiated a few weeks ago, and that was at the heart of a meeting of the chiefs of defense of a number of countries yesterday, and they've elaborated on the possible scenarios that we'll be faced with over the next 30 days. If the ceasefire is adopted within the 30 days that we will have to make decisions, we'll have to act, and use that truce as a basis and make sure it does not remain a ceasefire, but that it becomes actual peace. It will open Ukraine's future, and Ukraine will be back to normal with a perspective for sustainable peace. As a result, we've decided to keep working as we have over the last 3 years, but we have good hopes that the ceasefire, if it starts tomorrow, whether it happens or not, we will keep supporting Ukraine, which is still under bombs and missiles at the moment. It is still going, and as we were speaking, we were hoping it could stop, but it has not on the Russian side. So we will remain close to Ukraine. What we've sent to the armed forces, we will keep doing, but as a ceasefire is on the horizon. We need to work on the Ukrainian armed forces' future. They need to be able to defend themselves in the future. We will be with them, and they need to be able to enjoy all the powers and all the rights of a democracy. There is no future for Ukraine if it's not able to defend itself. Demilitarization in Ukraine is not a solution. It is just accepting that a democracy has one missing leg, just like someone could miss a leg. We've restated how necessary it was to restate that we place our full trust in the alliance, in NATO, but we know and we understood that Europe has now to play a role within this alliance, a role it did not used to play in the past. Some countries, and this includes mine, have hidden behind the American umbrella and had not invested in their defense because they thought that someone else would take care of it for them. And it was a brutal awakening when President Trump reminded us that we had to take care of our own defense. We've all decided to invest more. And during the NATO summit in June, we will all say that we have increased our expenses. It should be our priority for the security of our citizens, of our countries, and to preserve our democracies. It is absolutely essential for Europe to show it actually has an ability to defend itself, because deterrence is managed by the U.S. We've talked about that with Mr. Kubilius, and having the ability to defend oneself and having deterrence ability means having a resilient defense industry. We've also analyzed our own industry, what is called the back cap, and we've realized that countries should be able to rely on one another to save costs, to have mutual production, because the difference over the past few years, Russia has been able to ramp up its production while saving costs. In the West, we've actually ramped up production, but also the costs. So when comparing the expenses, the defense expenses in Russia and in Europe, let's bear in mind how much we can bear with similar amounts. We've also addressed what we expect from Europe, the Stability Compact, the Europe of democracy. Our defense industry these days cannot be treated just like other industries are treated, and we cannot compare our markets with countries where no regulations apply. We have a lot of standards to apply and a lot of rules to abide by, so we need time. We've set goals for ourselves, transition goals, ground to air defense, cyber warfare, hybrid threats, reducing red tape within the EU, in order to come up with measures that will call for practical headways in European defense, and to be able to send a message to our allies. Europe knows it has to start defending itself. It is very useful for our American friend as well, because under the previous administration, it was already shifting towards the Indo-Pacific region. And we think that we need to take into account the priorities of all the members of the alliance. We've also addressed the role of Europe. We've said that the investments that were announced are putting a weight on the countries, And a decision that was announced by our German friend is absolutely historic. The amendment of the Constitution, of the German Constitution, is a historic change because this is one of the legs of European deterrence. And I would like to commend all my European allies because these changes make an actual difference for the whole of the continent because we all contribute in peace and stability. We've also mentioned that stocks needed we needed stocking up, that they're severely depleted and that they should be defensive, not offensive. Everything that we've done push to take more responsibility within NATO. And this will only reinforce the alliance as a whole. The idea is to reach peace and to get rid of the danger of wars as it happened in the past for 70 years.
Bardzo dziękuję, drogi gospodarzu.
Thank you very much, dear Sebastian, dear Boris, Guido, John, dear friends. The giant is awakening. Europe is awakening. We are living through historic times, and we know now how we can get through this period of time. Democracy, beauty, goodwill. Our civilization is under threat. It is a massive threat, but we are very likely to be successful in facing this challenge. Why are we waking up? All member states are increasing their defense spending. It is an unprecedented increase since the end of the Cold War. The Europe as a community is creating a program for a joint industry for investment and expenses in the defense, which is confirmed by the resolution that was adopted today by the European Parliament. We have flagship projects like the Eastern Shield or the Baltic Defense. There are some budget rules that would hinder military expenses, and it will not be included in how we work out a deficit. This is how the intentions that we had yield results. This is only facts. It is reality. This proves, if anything, that the giant is waking up. Third point proving that we are actually waking up is how close the EU and the UK have grown together. This is the promise that was made during the campaign, the election campaign in the UK, and it is actually happening in the face of this threat coming from the East. We were not united enough, and the 500 million of Europeans deserve to be able to defend themselves in the face of that threat. They deserve a force that is able to protect peace in Ukraine. The defense ministers representing the greatest military powers, the countries who spend the highest levels, the highest amounts of money, we are determined, and we've been since the first day of the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. We are very aware of what this threat means, and we respect how determined our societies are. We feel hope when hearing the news from Saudi Arabia about the meeting between Washington and Kyiv. After weeks of uncertainty, our relationship with the US and the support to Ukraine is a way to get everyone in the transatlantic alliance reunited. We are back because I can say so because I've talked to those working at the logistic hub at the Jetchuk airport that is sending military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. It has actually resumed this morning. We have this clear opening for peace from Ukraine. The US are playing an essential part, and Europe is reinforcing its own position. Now the question is to be asked to those who attacked Ukraine. You've said you were in favor of peace. Is that true? Is it sincere? This is an actual test that we are putting the Russian Federation to. We have 3 priorities for action in Poland, and I would like to commend the fact that these 3 priorities were approved as shared goals, making sure that Russia remains as far as possible of our states, and this calls for supporting Ukraine. We call for continued support to Ukraine as it is fighting for its existence, and we need to be with them until the end. Second shared goal, transatlantic relationships. We are willing and ready to get more involved in Eastern strategic partnerships. Third goal, it is the construction of a military force, of infrastructure force, but also strength for military production, putting more in common, harmonization, unification, in military production, in the actions that we conduct. We need more unity, more joint programs, including for military mobility in our decision-making processes. We need to show a brave face in our parliaments, and we will be able to face the challenges coming our way with the budget for our armed forces, the resilience of society, and our military capability. We've also tackled cyber resilience and breakthroughs in technology. I want a European development of capabilities for AI, which is an absolutely essential element for the way our armed forces work, the training of our soldiers, and the way we handle our logistics. And this will be in the next few years. For the great armed forces of this continent, we need more coordination. We are prepared to have actions, to take actions, preparing Europe to a number of different scenarios. I am ever so grateful for those helping technological developments in Ukraine and those who look at what will happen after peace. I would like to thank Admiral Radakin, the Chief of Defence of the UK, and General Burkhardt, the Chief of Defence of France, for stressing that this needs to be brought to a political level. Our countries are proving that they are able to take care of their own security. So I would like to thank all of you. Thank you for this in my name and in the name of the European citizens who count on us, on our work and collaboration. Everyone has a role to play and will have their right place in this process, which, in my opinion, will be a way to come up with a solution that would be good for peace for Ukraine and for Europe. We will always need the strength for deterrence. The 5 ministers for defense of these 5 countries, the biggest European armed forces, are actually determined, and we will do everything to ensure security and peace to our countries in Europe.
UK Defence Secretary.
Tout d'abord, permettez-moi.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Minister Le Cornu for welcoming us today. It was a very productive day in terms of diplomacy and defense.
Decisive days in the push for peace in Ukraine, and yesterday's agreements between the US and Ukraine were a vital step, and I pay tribute to President Trump and President Zelensky for this breakthrough. The Ukrainians want peace, we all want peace, and as defense ministers we have been discussing and we are working to strengthen the push for peace. And I say to President Putin, over to you now. You said you want to talk, prove it. Accept the ceasefire, start negotiations, and end the war. And make no mistake, the pressure is now on Putin. And today we meet as the defense ministers of the E5 nations, the 5 largest defense spenders amongst the European nations of NATO. We know our responsibility. We know we must step up on Ukraine, on defense spending, on European security, and on all fronts. We are and we will further. And on stepping up on Ukraine, the focus for the majority of our discussions together today. This year, the UK will spend £4.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine, the highest level ever. The UK and France are jointly leading work on plans to drive the push for peace and drive the arrangements for security guarantees for Ukraine. We're doing this work together. We're cooperating closely with partner nations, and we're looking to build a coalition of the willing from Europe and beyond. And from today, we are accelerating that work. Yesterday, military chiefs from 34 nations, representatives from 37 nations met here in Paris, co-chaired by Admiral Radakin and by General Boucard, and attended for over an hour by President Macron. On Saturday, the UK Prime Minister will host a further summit of leaders, and our military leaders will meet again next week to continue the military planning with this wider network. And on stepping up on defence, 2 weeks ago, our UK Prime Minister announced that the UK will put in place the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027 and 3% in the next Parliament. Between our 5 nations, we recognise that we must take on more responsibility for European security. So today in Paris we have agreed we must rearm, we must spend more, we must work together to strengthen our industrial base. Our industry must be capable of innovating at wartime pace and must make defence an engine for economic growth in each of our nations. It's our job as defence ministers to keep our country safe, and in the coming weeks you'll see European allies coming ever closer together because our security is shared and our strength relies on that unwavering commitment to each other. And peace and stability in Europe will only be achieved through strengthening NATO and standing with Ukraine. That is what the 5 of us, as E5 defence ministers, are committed to securing. Thank you.
Nous allons commencer avec les questions. Une première question avec
We are going to start with question with Nicolas Barotte from the Figaro. Nicolas Barotte from the Figaro. You said that you didn't want to summarize guarantees, security guarantees to the troops sent in Ukraine, but it is important to send a message to Ukraine. What is France and the UK ready to commit in terms of ground troops, since you are leading this initiative? And to the other ministers, Poland, Italy, and Germany, are you going to participate in that effort to have troops on the ground? Thank you very much. I have had ample occasion to answer this question recently, and I can tell you that the rhythm is different in terms of political sphere and military sphere, and we realize that there was a rapprochement between the US and Ukraine recently that brought about this agreement yesterday, and now we have to discuss terms for peace or terms for sustainable ceasefire. In military terms, we have to plan beforehand, we have to anticipate, and we have to think ahead. This is our role. The French president and Sir Keir Starmer had discussions with President Trump and also with President Zelensky to project ourselves in 2025 and 2026 to say that at the end of the day, we have this huge country, Ukraine, and we have a front line on which we are hoping to see a ceasefire tomorrow. There are some attacks on the Black Sea, in the sky, and also in deep in depth. So these are diplomatic elements that our head of state and the head of government have given to our military chiefs. Second, yesterday we analyzed which forces we had facing each other. Of course, the day that combat will cease, Russian capabilities are going to rise again. And as you can tell, they have already stepped up their effort in the time of a war economy. So what can we do so that this ceasefire that has been negotiated is not fooling anybody? And this would be disastrous for our economy. And the aggressiveness of Russia is not going to diminish. And as you have realized, since 2008, it hasn't gone down. So after that, we can reflect on what is the kind of mission we could give our ground forces. We are not there to observe. We are not there to deconflict. We have to distinguish between these concepts. And the defense chief haven't based the debate on that discussion. What was discussed was what happens in the Black Sea. And the perception of Turkey is not the same as what we must think about in terms of nuclear capacity in Ukraine. So it mustn't be underestimated that thinking about all of these elements outside NATO criteria for a country that is not a member of the alliance is something that has never been done before, especially since weapons are still being used on the front line. And this is how European nations can become credible. And I think that our American ally is understanding this very clearly. There are figures going round, and these are for the media. Putting troops just behind the line of the ceasefire is not at all the same mission than to deploy troops along the Polish border, either on the Polish side or on the Ukrainian side of the Polish border. But this is far too soon to speculate. This afternoon, we heard that there is an emergency. Things are happening now. The first guarantee of security for Ukraine is the Ukrainian armed forces. So we'll need to be there over a long period. We cannot ask European troops to do the work of the European armed forces, the Ukrainian armed forces. And this is what we have done since the beginning. We are helping them to defend themselves. So we mustn't think backward. We are training them. We are deploying a lot of efforts. We have been reflecting with John Healey, with the two military chiefs, and we have to enlarge the thinking to more partners if they want. We have to work out the budget and the operational needs and all the elements that are necessary over the long term. We are talking about peace, about security, about defense. We're not talking about war and escalation. We're not talking about all that. We are talking of how to stop all this movement. And this is a historical turning point.
Gerne anschließen daran direkt. Das erste festzuhalten bleibt.
I would like to add something. First of all, our ambition must be to anticipate the situation thanks to our analysis and thanks to our preparation, thanks to our thinking ahead. We must be in a position to act. That is why I am happy to see that the military chiefs met yesterday to see what is a good response militarily. What can we do without political will and orientation? It's too soon to have a political guideline for the moment. Now, what will happen when we need to decide who does what? We have to decide whether we are crossing the bridge when we reach the bridge. But I don't think we are there yet. Britta Sundberg, Der Spiegel. A question for the French and German minister. Have you today broached the subject of an independent European defense in case the US withdraw their support to Europe? This is a topic that has been worrying us, but not in the hypothesis that the US would withdraw completely, but in a democratic framework, maybe there could be a shift. Maybe the US could decide to have a greater commitment towards the Indo-Pacific. And we don't know in what way or when or how. So I think we will need to remain adaptable to a new rhythm. And that's why a couple of weeks ago I made a proposal with the American defense minister to develop a roadmap so that we can share the weight and so as to avoid gaps in capacity building and reorganize burden sharing progressively in order to know who does what and to offset reductions in one direction, but there has been no announcement from the White House or the Pentagon. And this is something that we could anticipate, but the commitment of the US to NATO has been reinforced recently. As far as I'm concerned, my political positions are known, and I think that the French president had quite a harsh message, but I was pleased with it in a sense. The model in which we delegated the supply of our energy from Russia, the industry in China, and security in the US was something that we could explain. And I understand how, in the past, such decisions were reached. But whatever the political culture present here, nobody wishes to say that it would make sense to carry on like this. I think that, as Boris said very wisely, it is very important to catch the new rhythm and adapt. Why did we build our nuclear arsenal against the Americans? The Americans didn't want us to have any nuclear weapons, but we have a history, and this is now a situation that we are facing as a defense ministry. We want to remain pragmatic. We want to try our best to organize ourselves and beyond any announcements, any talk for the media. We want to act concretely. We want to act on space, aerospace. And it is true that in the past, our predecessors decided that part of the strategic autonomy in Europe involved a space element. So we have to carry on. There are a number of points that can be exploited. I would like our teams to be able to progress on the reflection. We have made a lot of progress with our German friends. There were discussions that were not easy. And it's a very heavy work. Refresh the Lancaster House Treaty, Quirinal, that was signed between Italy and France. That meant that we had to take great decisions. This was the case with Poland recently. But we need to have a pragmatic agenda, quite a rough one, actually, even boring. But it's in the detail that we'll be able to change the geopolitical paradigm.
To have peace in Europe, a strong NATO, and a stable, secure Euro-Atlantic area. And when Secretary Hegseth was with us in Brussels at the meeting that Minister Pistorius mentioned, he made clear that the challenge for European nations to step up does not mean the US stepping away from Ukraine or stepping away from European security. And I think we've seen that yesterday, where the agreement between the US and Ukraine for the offer on the table to Putin now of a 30-day interim ceasefire was followed immediately by the resumption of military aid from the US to Ukraine and the resumption of intelligence sharing, US data, imagery, intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
Nous avons une question de Paolo Levi.
Question from Paolo Levi. Good afternoon. A question for all of you. After the agreement yesterday in Jeddah, the priority today is to carry on helping Ukraine. And perhaps there is a hypothesis to send a peace mission on the ground, and that now has become secondary. Are you all in agreement with a peace mission? I think that Italy is favorable to such an initiative, but on the condition that this is under the aegis of the United Nations. Are you all in agreement with this possibility? And then another question for the Italian minister. How do you reconcile this need for strategic autonomy in Europe with F-35 and American equipment when France, for example, underlines the importance to have European equipment? And a question also, Mr. Le Cornu announced that the next meeting of this format will take place in Italy. Would you be able to tell us the date and the place? Thank you.
Giornalisti italiani fanno più domande, però non va.
Thank you. Italian journalists always ask 3 questions in one. That's not fair. I think that we are all very happy with what happened in Jeddah yesterday. We are always pleased to see efforts towards peace. The fact that we are moving forward towards a truce is extremely important. But at this very moment, there are still bombs falling in Ukraine. There are airplanes and jets flying over the territory and over infrastructure, whether civilian or military. So this need is absolutely crucial and still ongoing. And we are hoping very much that Russia is going to agree to start this truce. Now, when the truce becomes reality, then we will take stock of the conditions and we will see how the various countries around the world can play a part, because this will mean that Ukraine will be able to go back to normal. This is what the UK and France have begun doing, thinking of the various scenarios. And why have we started doing that? Because ministers of defense don't have a right to reason only on the best possible scenarios. We must envisage all the various scenarios possible, from the worst to the best. And if the worst scenario happens and we hadn't made plans for that, that would be a great failure on our part. So we must get ready and prepare some technical solutions and give ourselves the possibility of intervening, whatever the scenario. And this is where our work is very difficult. We cannot only work on the positive side. We have to allow for the negative. And the same goes for acquisition of weapons for the defense industry. And we have built our defense industry in such a way that our industries do not have the capacity of production that we would like. This doesn't involve France or the UK, but as far as we're concerned, we don't have the same capability of the US. So when our industries didn't manage to cope with capacity, then we bought equipment abroad. This is a typical example for the F-35. I don't think that we want to stop all relationships commercially with the US. I'm sure that Europe will not want to be antagonistic with the US. We will want to remain allies, even from a technological point of view, because it is the sum of all the technological industries that mean that NATO is powerful. And we cannot break up the Western alliance on the altar of industrial autonomy. We must improve technologies and we must make sure that we work effectively. And I would like to open a parenthesis. When Italy decided to produce these jets, we showed that we were able to cooperate and produce at home.
One question for TV. I absolutely agree. We need to support Ukraine as much as we can, and we need to keep working on the equipment sessions. You have representatives of countries who keep doing it. It is going to be the 46th session to decide on packages for Ukraine. As Ukraine allies, we work on it as our top priority. For procurement, Europe should ramp up its production capacities with orders that are being placed, and as it is today, we would not have been enough, and we are not creating producers. Instead of weakening it, we want to reinforce them. They are our ally. We are members of NATO, and we want to reinforce the transatlantic relationship. We must actually work. You have 5 states who actually place orders, and the European industry will not be able to produce all of this and to deliver it quickly. Dorota Pawolek from a Polish media outlet will use the translation to use my mother tongue. I would like to circle back to what you've said, Minister. The allies, what is their vision and their opinion? Because you're saying that armament procurement should happen outside of Europe when necessary, in the US, in Korea, for example, because the European industry is not able to cover all of these. But did you make any practical proposal to reboot the production in Poland or new equipment in Poland? And this will be my question for you. The Polish industry has a lot to do. Munition manufacturers, the ramping up of our capabilities, especially in domains in which equipment are very much in demand. This is a conversation I've had recently with Minister Lecornu. And we've also tackled the possibility for the Polish industry to buy from France, and I hope that France will use the Baobab or our system ground to air. I will be paying a visit with representatives of the Polish industry. Poland has a lot to catch up with for its defense and industrial base because we buy a lot from our American allies. We buy equipment from South Korea because we are reinforcing our capabilities. We are preserving the relationship. We have big projects with the UK, especially in the maritime domains. We want to have deep strike capabilities, and we are counting on common deterrence, nuclear deterrence. I'm referring to proposals that were made by France. We are currently choosing a partner for a market for submarines. We are very determined to build a huge potential for the Polish armed forces. It will benefit the whole of the transatlantic alliance. I think you were looking at me, so you were expecting comments from me. The situation has changed quite quickly. As for France, in 1 year and a half, we had never sold that many armament systems in Europe. Caesar, Howitzer, I was welcoming my counterpart from the Netherlands for the Barracuda submarines, and something is definitely happening, because in some countries we are in competition to respond to some of the markets, which is good actually and healthy, which means that when some countries want to buy from other European countries, they have a choice between the British, Italian, German or French industry, just to talk about our maritime industry, where we have a certain degree of competition. There is an offer that exists, and then land capabilities. There is an offer in terms of land capabilities. Second message, the production economy to help Ukraine is yielding results. I said so in Parliament. Between 2026 and 2030, we need to place 7 billion euros additional to get their production lines to the maximum capacity. This is the work we've done. And my third point will be that to go further, we'll have to invest in new production lines. And this is a kind of chicken and egg situation, because if we keep buying outside of Europe, we will never reach that critical level where we can require the companies to self-fund their new production lines. And when Vladislav talks about the conversations that we have between us, there is one projection that we have to keep in mind, and it is wondering when, which the Americans have done very well in a lot of countries, when do we start doing licensed production and cross-production, which is a way to resort to local employment. Most of our exports of equipment in the Indo-Pacific region or Indonesia, for example, relies on benefits that happens at the local level. This is what is happening. Why does it have to be more difficult to achieve in an area where we share the same money and the same standards? And it happens at a minister level. It is the state that gets involved. We are competing on some of the segments. It is not bad news. It is good news, actually, because it is good competition. Our industrials have to be highly efficient. The delays become acceptable, because when I say the delays in some American manufacturers, well, maybe we are not doing too bad. But 2-3 years ago, it was absolutely unthinkable for European ministers for defense to talk about that in a joint press conference. Thank you very much. This is the end of this press conference. Thank you very much.